9. Bullied Baker. Single mother of 2, Justina Raczynski didn't grow up with a lot of money. When she had children of her own, she vowed to do whatever it took to give them more than she had as a child. She capitalized on her talents as both an artist and a baker and began selling artisan cookies out of her home in Iowa. Justina's skills paid off, but her business was still getting off the ground and she depended on every order she received to make ends meet. So when someone placed a $1,000 order in 2019, she was thrilled. She knew that such a big order would provide a major boost to her finances and made plans for the customer to come over that evening and pay ahead of time for the materials. Justina was careful about who she let into her home, especially when she was there by herself. But the customer had a woman's name, and this made her feel comfortable with letting them come by. Instead of a woman, however, a very large man showed up. He told Justina that he was the customer's husband. It wasn't entirely unusual for people to have family members drop off payment, and the man seemed harmless enough, so Justina let him inside. The man noticed she looked like she'd been crying and asked her what was wrong. After a long day arguing with her children's father, she found herself opening up to the complete stranger. He made Justina feel at ease, even though they didn't know each other, and even offered to help relieve some tension by cracking her back for her. And so she obliged. Just when the young mother let her guard down, the man put a gun to her head and put his hand over her mouth. He bound Justina with zip ties and brutally assaulted her. When it was over, he forced her to drive him to an ATM and made her take out $40 for him. As soon as the man got out of her car, Justina locked the doors and slammed on the gas. She'd never felt so violated or terrified in her life, and she almost gave up her business after the ordeal as she struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. The perpetrator was identified as Stephen Mork, the husband of one of Justina's mother's co-workers. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison and must serve at least 17 years before he becomes eligible for parole. Justina prevailed over the emotional aftermath of the assault and has since relocated to another state where her cookie business is thriving. She was also instrumental in campaigning for legal changes in Iowa to protect unlicensed home bakers and artisans from the kind of terror she encountered. 8. Homicide or Handyman. 57-year-old Cynthia Cole vanished shortly after attending an art festival in Jensen Beach, Florida in early 2022. After not hearing from her or seeing any social media activity for several days, which was unusual, a friend reported her missing. While investigating Cole's disappearance, police obtained doorbell camera footage of her handyman, 34-year-old Kiyoki Hilo Demich, parking her Jeep near her house. During a search of the missing woman's backyard, Martin County Sheriff's deputies noticed that her septic tank was ajar. They looked inside and saw Cole's body. Sheriff William Snyder told local news outlet WPBF that it was unlike anything he'd ever seen in his more than 40-year career. To add to the shocking nature of the discovery, Demich had worked for Cole for several years before she was murdered and discarded. While they may not have been best friends, it's surprising that something like this happened after they'd at least been on a first-name basis for so long. Authorities accused Demich of assaulting and killing Cole inside her home before dumping her in the tank. According to Assistant State Attorney Nita Denton, he waited in her shower until she returned home. When she arrived, he ambushed her and brutally beat her until he thought she was unconscious. He then drowned her and proceeded to abuse her sexually. Just months after his arrest, Demich agreed to a deal with prosecutors and pleaded guilty to murder in exchange for a life sentence without parole. He was also convicted of burglary of an occupied dwelling with an assault or battery, grand theft, and a handful of other crimes. 7. A multi-billion-dollar settlement. In 2019, an 83-year-old grandmother named Betty Thomas was brutally stabbed to death in her Texas home by a cable repairman who'd done some work in her home the day before. He arrived in uniform and told the elderly woman that he had to finish the previous day's work. Since she knew who the man was, Thomas didn't think twice about letting him back into her house. What she didn't know was that the Charter Spectrum employee, later identified as Roy James Holden, was off work that day and had his own disturbing reasons for stopping by. Holden pretended he needed to complete the job he'd been assigned to do, but instead he killed the senior citizen. He then went on a shopping spree with her credit and debit cards. The disgraced repairman eventually pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life in prison, but the family also held Charter Spectrum's parent company, Charter Communications, responsible for Betty's death. In late 2022, a Dallas County jury found that the company ignored red flags about Holden that it should have recognized, and that Charter Communications also forged documents relating to the service call at Betty's house. In a landmark judgment, the company was ordered to pay $7 billion to Betty's surviving family members. And while it won't bring the woman back, the shockingly high amount is meant to bring some resolution to the heartbreaking case and to what many believe was a needless and preventable death. The unusually high settlement reportedly reflected more than 8% of Charter Communications' market capitalization at the time, which was worth an estimated $80 billion. 6. Coin-snatching thief. While recovering from back surgery in 2022, Dr. Nancy Kelly hired a 30-year-old homeless handyman named Christopher James Plush to help out around the house. As a former foster parent, the elderly woman didn't judge Plush for being homeless. In fact, she let him stay at her house in Towns County, Georgia for 18 days while he got on his feet, figuring the situation would benefit them both. She also wasn't too worried because Plush demonstrated that he had the skills for the things she needed done, and he came greatly recommended. Dr. Kelly thought so highly of the young man that she even bought him some new clothes. Unfortunately, the kind deed backfired. As Kelly would later learn, Plush was taking her car at night without her knowledge or permission. He also allegedly stole thousands of valuable coins that Kelly and her late husband had collected together over many years before his passing. The collection was worth an enormous amount of money, but it also had immense sentimental value. In addition to taking the coins, Plush was accused of co-conspiring with a friend, 24-year-old Devin Barry Lurie, to steal a large amount of cash and prescription drugs. Luckily, police caught the pair in time to recover most of Kelly's collection. Plush and Lurie were charged with 1 count of burglary and 3 counts of theft by taking. At the time of their arrest, the Town County Sheriff's Office said that the suspects could possibly face even more charges, including elder abuse. Kelly spoke out about her experience in an interview with Fox 5 Atlanta, stating that she came forward because she wanted to encourage people to be good Samaritans, but to also use common sense. 5. A summer setup. In early 2020, a 20-year-old man invited a young woman named Summer Desjardins into his home in Warren, Michigan. They'd met on social media and agreed to meet face-to-face to exchange drugs for intimacy. Shortly after the 24-year-old blonde arrived, a gun-wielding masked intruder barged in and proceeded to rob and shoot the victim. Summer and the thief fled the scene together. Police soon caught up with an arrested Summer, whom they suspected of helping to set up the burglary. They also charged Summer's boyfriend Daniel Wargo as the suspected burglar. Wargo was convicted on multiple counts including armed robbery, attempted murder, possession of a weapon by a felon, and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. He was sentenced to 15 to 30 years in prison. Summer pleaded no contest to conspiracy to commit armed robbery in exchange for getting several other more serious charges dropped. She was sentenced to 6 to 28 years in prison. At her sentencing, she read an emotional statement expressing remorse for her actions and explained that she was addicted to meth at the time of the robbery. Her lawyer, Sally Irwin, said that Summer turned her life around and that she was proud of her client. Sadly though, the incident ruined the victim's life, and he continues to suffer from the physical, mental, social, and emotional effects of what happened to him, according to the prosecution. 4. Rolex robbery. While enjoying drinks at a rooftop bar in Fort Lauderdale, Florida in 2022, a man invited 2 women he'd just met to accompany him back to his apartment. They obliged, and the trio continued to drink when they arrived at the man's Lauderdale-by-the-Sea home. At some point, the man fell asleep. When he woke up, the women had vanished along with some of his valuables, including a $25,000 Rolex watch and his American Express Platinum card. The victim would later tell authorities that he never let his drink out of his sight the entire time. In other words, he didn't think he'd been drugged, but that he simply dozed off and stayed asleep while the women quietly rifled through his belongings and made their exit. When he woke up, he texted both of the women asking for his belongings back. After receiving no reply, he reported the theft to the police. Law enforcement released surveillance footage of the suspects in hopes that someone would recognize them and come forward with information that would lead to their arrest. At the moment, it's unclear whether these suspects were captured or if they're still at large. 3. Theft in Thailand. British tourist Mark Pearson was vacationing in the beachside town of Pattaya in Thailand in early 2017 when he met 30-year-old Somboon Supasan. They met over dinner, and Pearson felt like they'd gotten to know each other well enough to invite Supasan back to his hotel room. Unfortunately, he was wrong, and the young woman made off with 170,000 Thai baht, £4,000 or $4,821. Pearson didn't realize it until the next morning, by which time Supasan had fled with cash in hand. He reported the theft to the police, who were able to track Supasan's spending. They discovered that she used at least some of the ill-gotten funds on designer clothes and jewelry, as well as a nose job. While searching her phone, officers found photos of her with a bandage over her nose shortly after the operation. During questioning, Supasan allegedly admitted to the theft, but by then, all the cash was gone. She was arrested, but it's unclear whether Pearson got any of his money back. 2. Council workers. Over a several-week period starting in late 2022, residents in and around London were plagued by a series of robberies committed by men posing as workers from the local housing council. In one particularly disturbing incident, a group of disguised men went to the Westminster home of an elderly woman and told her that they were there to fix a leaky roof. Instead, they ransacked the apartment. Residents warned each other about the disturbing uptick in home invasions on a local community safety forum on the internet. Some civilian commentators didn't seem surprised. In fact, one person said something to the effect of, "Oh no, here we go again." Others expressed shock and dismay at the audacity of the thieves and said they hoped the elderly victim was okay. The incident also raised concerns about other vulnerable community members. The London Metropolitan Police acknowledged that there was a spike in recent robberies and advised the public to be extra vigilant. They also recommended that people conceal their valuables to make their homes less appealing targets for robbery. However, it's hard for some people to agree that a person should be careful about what they display in the privacy of their home for the sake of keeping bad guys out of it. Sadly, the spate of robberies proves that there's no such thing as being too careful when it comes to letting someone into your home, and that even when someone arrives in uniform, it's not a bad idea to ask for proper ID, just to be extra safe. 1. Seductive strangers. In late 2022, a prominent Los Angeles attorney met two attractive young women named Holly and Brittany while out at a bar in Beverly Hills. He invited them back to his home for a nightcap, but ended up getting robbed. The lawyer, who insisted on remaining anonymous, told local station KTLA that the alleged perpetrators incapacitated him with vodka that was laced with drugs. Once he was passed out, the sultry pair ransacked the victim's house, taking any cash they could find. They also stole 3 of the man's Rolexes, worth around $17,000 altogether. He woke up 15 hours later with a massive headache. It was the first time he ever passed out from drinking alcohol, which is why he believes he was drugged. The incident left the attorney with the inkling that he wasn't the only victim, and that he was targeted either by transients or by members of an organized theft operation. Speaking with the media, he reminded the public that robberies in the area were up by 11% that year, and he warned people to be extra vigilant about their safety. Would you rather trust a highly recommended stranger to care for your home while you're away on a 2-week vacation, or let a shady-looking man in a utility uniform inside your house while you're there to do what he claims is a quick but important repair? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.